Our next session, what is a Paris Agreement compatible business, includes a Q&A session, and the floor will be open to questions after every speech. So I would encourage you all to share your questions with us. Growing changes are occurring in multiple business sectors because of visionary leaders. The purpose of this session is to provide inspiration based on specific real-life examples of a successful transition to a net zero organization, a Paris Agreement compatible business based on a sustainable business development model. So let me welcome our next speaker, Karol Gobczyński, who is the Head of Climate and Energy at Ingka Group, an advisory committee member to the Science Based Targets Initiative, RE100 of the Climate Group, and the RE Source platform. Karol, it is a pleasure to have you with us today. Hand over to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation, and such a pleasure to present after so many great speakers. So my name is Karol, and I'm leading the climate and energy within the Ingka Group, which owns and operates IKEA retail within 32 markets, responsible for 90% of IKEA sales. And I prepared a couple of slides to share today with you. Yep, so you should see them. Yep, so Climate Positive IKEA is a shared strategic initiative for all the companies working under IKEA brand. And on the next slide, we can see, sorry, I cannot move the slides. Can you help me? Yeah, thank you. The commitment is the same for the businesses, for the government, and for individuals. We need to keep the global warming on the level 1.5. And on the next slide, you can see that to keep the global warming on the level 1.5, the pathway is quite clear for all of us. First of all, we need to halve the greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and we need to reach net zero latest 2050. And we know that net zero, it means that around 90% of emissions reduction, and then we can neutralize 10%, not the opposite way. And then on the next slide, I would like to spend some time to explain why it's important for us. First of all, it is our responsibility. As a business, we are part of the problem, and we are committed to be part of the solution. And we see that there are multiple areas where we can lead the change. Second area is connected to the part that it is what our customers and coworkers expect from us. We are doing the climate action research to understand what is the perception of the climate change among our customers and what they expect from us as a company. And it's clearly visible that expectation towards the business is the same as from government, to enable people and make climate action much more accessible and affordable. And coworkers, of course, coworkers want that climate action is part of everyday job. And this is our responsibility to enable and integrate climate action on all the level across the organization. And then the third one, it is net zero emissions is a new growth model. We know that the cost structure and revenue structure we see today within the economy, this will change within the net zero economy. There are many new opportunities to build new revenues, as well as opportunities to lower down the cost. But to do that, companies need to look into their risks and opportunities, what was mentioned very nicely before, into transitional risks and physical risks, which are coming from the changes within the environment. Yeah. And on the next slide, so looking on all of it, we know that, first of all, we need to understand our impact. And that's the work that we've been working on, to see what is the total footprint across the value chain of the company. And then when we know the footprint, on the next slide, we can see that we need to come back to the science and what we need to do when it comes to halving the emissions and reaching net zero. So on the next slide, you can see the main activities which will help us to reduce the emissions. So I see that slide is not moving. Thank you. So it is about designing all the products with circular capabilities, as well as offering circular services to enable the circular flows of products and materials within the society. It is about using materials and food ingredients with much lower climate footprint. It is about striving for electrification and using renewable energy use across the value chain and improving the energy efficiency. It is about sustainable mobility options, because when you are representing the retail business, the part of your footprint is connected to customer travel to the stores, as well as your deliveries. And it is as well offering plant-based options to the customers, so it's easy for them to reduce the climate footprint. And the last area, which is still needs some more guidance when it comes to removing and storing carbon through the forestry, agriculture, and products, where currently the greenhouse gas protocol is under development to include the carbon removal, land use, and bioenergy, and how to account it and report the emissions. And that's where we are committed to report the removal connected to IKEA supply chain. Additional to halving the emissions by 2030, we need to as well, we see opportunities when we can reduce the emissions within the society by enabling our customers, suppliers, and tenants. Additionally, we can take the investment, what was mentioned before, the investments are very crucial to enable the transition. That's why Ingka Group, during last 10 years, invested 2.5 billion euro in renewable energy generation. Currently, we own and operate more wind turbines around the world than stores, actually. And we committed next 4 billion to be invested within this decade to enable renewable energy consumption across the value chain. And this is part of our agenda where it will help us to reduce the value chain emissions, but as well going beyond, enable broader society to use renewable energy, because not all the generation will be connected to our value chain. And the last part is about regulations. We know we need to advocate and enable governments to step up when it comes to commitments and adopting much more ambitious targets. And here we are big believers within in ambition loop. That's why we are bringing the examples. And when we go on the next slide, you can see that we believe that actually the biggest source of optimism, it's always action. And because action, it shows how to make it really happen. And on the next slide, I'm bringing the examples coming from this value chain. So we have already, when it comes to materials, 17% of materials used within IKEA products are recycled materials, and 56% is renewable materials. And by 2030, there is a commitment to be 100% renewable and renewable or recycled materials use. Food ingredients, very important part to enable customers to use plant-based options. And we are known from our meatball, and this is as well a big contributor to our footprint when it comes to the food ingredients. And that's why we introduced the plant-based option across all the markets, where people can choose the similar dish with the same taste and texture, but only with 4% of the climate footprint in comparison to meat alternative. It is about already using almost half of energy used in production is coming from renewable sources. It is about increasing intermodal transport, and it is about using renewable energy within operations. And today we use 56% of energy we use. It's coming from renewable sources. And last year we increased that with our new investments in Russia, when we invested in solar plants, and we are co-owner of the solar plants as first non-energy utility company on that market. It is about offering zero emission deliveries, and here we have 11%, and our commitment by 2025 to have 100% zero emission deliveries, which is helping to reduce climate footprint, but as well emissions, what we heard previously from Eleni. It is about offering products which are enabling to reduce the climate footprint from product use at home, as well as enabling to reduce the energy bills. And we've been communicating a lot that we are selling only LED lighting from 2016, but what is even more important, during last years, since we set science-based targets, we improved the energy efficiency of the lighting, which we offer by 46%. And then it's about offering second chance for products and offering spare parts, integrating circular hubs within the IKEA stores. Today, we operate 170 circular hubs within our stores when in connection with the buyback services, and working on removing and storing carbon standard. Yeah, and when we go further, we know that if we will stay on the current trajectory when it comes to climate change, the risks to mitigate, the opportunities to mitigate the risks are very limited. But when we look on the net transition, then we see that the risks are much easier to mitigate by taking the right investments and business decisions. And we are doing our risk assessment across our business, and we see today that one of the key opportunities is connected to circular business, offering sustainable products, using renewable energy in an efficient way, as well as low carbon logistics. Yeah, next one. And this is actually the core of the business, because business is all about mitigating risk and capturing the opportunities. If you are too slow, then you are staying behind and losing the market share. And this is why it's so important to act today. And this is not, as it was mentioned before, the CSR agenda. This is the core business agenda to be relevant on the market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karol, for your insights. We are now going to see if there are any questions for the Q&A session from you. Are there any questions for Karol?
Yeah, what is the biggest part? I think the size of the organization. And I think very often when you are working on leading the climate agenda, it's important to focus on enablers. What will enable the entire organization to take action instead of betting on just one action? And I think this is the big learning and always the biggest challenge as well, to secure, for example, CO2 measurements across the business, that they are integrated within the business performance and the goals are being set. So the business integration across the governance structure, I think that's the biggest challenge when it comes to big company. But from the other hand, there is the biggest potential when it comes to unlocking the coworkers' potential.
Thank you, Karol. And what are your SBT levels?
Yeah. So when it comes to scope 1 and 2, we are aligned with 1.5. So we have 80% reduction target. And when it comes to scope 3, we are currently reviewing our goals in line with new net zero standard launched last year. And so we will come with the new targets when it comes to scope 3 to align them with 1.5, not only below 2 degrees.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? We are just checking the Q&A chat box. What you presented is for Sweden. What about other countries?
Yeah, so this is the global overview, actually. The good news is the footprint is covering the entire, all the markets from the Ingka Group perspective. So 90% of the sales in 32 markets. So when it comes to taking action for us, it's important to act on all of the markets and with the same speed. And that's why we are as well advocating for regulations within all the markets to create a good playing field.
Thank you. Just waiting to see if there are any more questions. Yes. How do you cooperate with suppliers? Do you select forward-thinking ones or also help them improve alongside yourself?
Yeah, I think here I can come back to my experience when I start my journey within IKEA. I actually been working with IKEA suppliers. It was 10 years ago, and we established the reporting of greenhouse gas emissions for all the suppliers, and then we set the targets for all the suppliers and been working on. So that was the part of taking the lead and then showing through the KPIs which suppliers perform the best. And today, the Inter-IKEA group that is responsible for supply chain, for example, is as well having the financing program for the on-site solar generation, as well as enabling the renewable electricity consumption within the factories. Just as a few examples.
Thank you, Karol. Just waiting to see if there are any more questions. I think that is it. Thank you so much, Karol, for your time and sharing your insights with us. Thank you so much for your time.